In this lesson, we're going to be learning how to solve a quadratic equation by using the completing the square method. So we're going to solve a quadratic equation using the completing the square method. Now this method has several steps for you to follow. So we want to make sure we first read all the steps and then we'll apply it into an actual example. So these are the steps to follow. This is the standard form of a quadratic equation. Okay, standard form of a quadratic equation. The first step will be to subtract the c term, which is this one right here. Subtract the c term. So we want to move c. To this side. Okay. Step 2 is to divide both sides of a. This is the term a, the coefficient of the first term, by the leading coefficient. Now the idea is that the leading coefficient, you want it to be 1. Okay, you want that to be 1. Now step 3, extremely important. You want to take whatever you have for the second term, therefore your b. Okay, you want to take the b. You want to divide it by 2, and then you're going to take that answer and square it. Okay? So you're taking the b divided by 2, and then you square it. And that will give you something. Okay, that will give you something. Step 4, you're going to take whatever you got from step 3. So your your answer for step 3, and you're going to add that to both the left and the right side of the given equation. Okay? And then step 5 is to simply solve using the square root method. Now, these are all the steps in words. Let's go ahead and do an example so we can see how this actually works out. So, example 1, x squared minus 8x plus 15. The first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to rewrite it. And I'm going to add the equals to 0. Now is the standard form of a quadratic. If I follow my steps, it says to subtract the c term. Think about this is how it looks. Okay? That's the standard form. So 15 is a c term. So I'm going to subtract that. Okay? So then I have x squared minus 8x equals negative 15. Now, the next step is to take the coefficient of the first term, which is a. In this case, it's just 1. Now, I don't need to divide by 1 because anything divisible by 1 is just 1. So that second step, it's already, I don't need to do it in this case, okay? Now, so I did the first step. The second step, I don't need to because the coefficient of the first term, the a, is already 1. So now I move on to the third step, which is to take the b, so the negative a, divided by 2, and square it. Well, negative 8 divided by 2 is negative 4. Negative 4 squared is positive 16. Now, the next step says to take the result of step 3 and add it to both the left and the right side of the given equation. So that's what I'm going to do now. Okay, I'm going to add 16 here. And then I have 15 here. I'm going to add, let me put that in red so you can actually see where that is coming from. 16 here, 16 there. Okay, so I add the 16 to both the left and right side of the equation. Now, going back to factoring. Now, with factoring, there's a process when you have a perfect square trinomial. And this is the idea of completing the square. The left side of the equation becomes a perfect square trinomial. Okay? And in order for perfect square trinomial, okay, there. Now, we can rewrite this as the solution of a perfect square trinomial. So I am running out of space. I'm going to go here. So I can take the x squared minus 8x plus 16 and rewrite it as x minus 4 square equals, well, what is negative 15 plus 16? Positive 1. Okay? So the left side of the equation turns into a perfect square trinomial that I can rewrite it as x minus 4 both square. Well, think about this. If you take this and you factor it out, okay, I'm going to factor it using the AC method. So 1 times 16 is 16 factors of 16 that will add to 8. That's 4 and 4. So this is 4x minus 4x plus 16. Because you bring the first sign down, and then a negative times a positive is a negative. Split it in the middle. What does 2 have in common? X. So I have x minus 4. What do these two have in common? Negative 4. X minus 4. Well, what repeats? X minus 4. What do I have left? X minus 4. Well, it's the same. So that means I can rewrite it as x minus 4 squared. And this is where this comes from. Because this comes from that. Because it's a perfect square trinomial. Okay? So now, this is side work. Okay? Side work. Now that I am here, this is where I am now. This is where I am right now. Right there. I need to solve using the square root method. So the idea is we first are given a quadratic. We are going to rewrite it in a way that we can use the square root method to solve it. And that process is called completing the square. So now if I want to cancel the square, I need to square root both sides. Oh, this yellow is not ideal. Let's go ahead and rewrite that. Let's rewrite this, if you don't mind. I'm going to go ahead and rewrite this. I need a little bit more space. So what I have now is x minus 4 squared equals 1, right? Now I need to cancel the square, so I'm going to square root both sides. So I'm left with x minus 4 equals plus or minus 1. Make sure I know that that's not part of that. So now in order to solve for x, I'm going to add the 4 to both sides. X equals 4 plus or minus 1. Well, if you think about it, that's x equals 4 plus 1 is 5. And then 4 minus 1 is 3. So these are the two values that x, the two solutions for x. Okay? So make sure we follow the steps. We have a lot of space. That way we can do our work organized. Looks like I have a mess here. Okay. So that was the first example. The next examples are simply going to ask us to write, to still solve using completing the square and then the square root method, but it just wants us to write our answer in a different format. Okay, so the format that they want us to use is the vertex form. Okay, and this is used a lot whenever you are dealing with parabolas. And we'll learn about that a bit later, okay? Whenever we're dealing with parabolas. Okay, so this is the format that they would like for us to use. Instead of having 0 here, we're going to have a y. So it's y equals parentheses x plus h squared plus k. The h and the k are the vertex of the parabola. That is just the minimum or the max. Oops, I wrote that wrong. The min or the max of the parabola. Okay, the lowest point or the highest point. And we'll learn more about that later, okay? So the idea is you go through the process of completing the square, okay? You do all of that. And then when you get here, you change. So the step changes right here. The process of rewriting the work. So let me just talk about this example. The question says y equals x squared minus 8x plus 15. The first thing I did was to change the y to a 0. Okay, so then from here, right here, No, I can't use white. That makes no sense. From here, I'm going to use my completing the square process, which is to remove the c term, which is in this case is 15. So I minus the 15. Okay, that's 15. Then I'm going to, what did I do? Minus the 15 right here. And then let's see, this is the step which comes from here. Then I go ahead and take the v and divide it by 2 and square it. That gives me 16. Then I go ahead and add the 16 to both sides. This is what I'm doing right here. Add the 16 to both sides. And then that leaves me with 1 equals x squared minus 8x plus 16. So if you notice from here, this step right here, this is when we went here and we just went and solved. From this step right here, we went and solved right here. And this is where it changes. That's going to be different. Instead of going ahead and solve using the square root method, we're going to minus the 1. So we're going to put this 1, we're going to the other side, making it equal to 0. And then we're going to change the 0 for the y. So this is the same problem as this one. It's just showing you that instead of saying these are the two values of x, well, now I just want the answer to look like this. Okay, now let's see an example. Oops. Yeah, we're here. Okay, so we're given this equation. And it wants us to put this equation into the form, the vertex format. So I'm going to go ahead and rewrite it here. Okay. So the first thing I'm going to do is change the y to 0. That's the first step. Okay. The next step I'm going to do, I'm going to use the completing the square. So I'm going to minus the 7, which is a c term. So this becomes negative 7 equals x squared plus 8x. Then I'm going to take the 8 divided by 2 and square it. 8 divided by 2 is 4 squared, 16 again. So then I'm going to take that 16 and I'm going to add it to both sides of my equation. So I'm going to say negative 7 plus, I'm going to put that 16 there in a minute, plus the 16. You see that? Now I'm just going to simplify that a little bit. I'm using different colors to try to show you the different steps. So negative 7 plus 16, that gives me, what is that? 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 9. Okay, good. Hopefully I didn't make a mistake there. Okay, so then I'm going to go here. 9 equals x squared plus 8x plus 16. Now, again, this turns into a perfect square trinomial. Square trinomial. Okay, so the answer to that is going to be x plus 4. Now, where do I get the x plus 4? Let's think about that. Where does that come from? Remember, the perfect square trinomial, when you factor it out, the answers are going to be the same. Factors of 16 that add to 8 is 4 and 4. So now, from here, from this step right here, very important, from this step right here, what color to use? From this step right here is where we're going to do different than the first example. Because they don't want the value of x. They want the answer in the vertex form, in this form right here. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to minus the 9. This is going to be 0 equals x plus 4 squared minus 9. And the last step is to change the 0 to a y. Okay? And then that's in the form. Change the 0 to a y. And that's my answer in this format. Okay. So that was that part. So we are given in a quadratic equation. We are using completing the square to rewrite it in a different format. Okay. Maybe I can label. This was step 1, which is to put the y to a 0. Step 2 is to subtract the 7. Step 3 is to take the b and divide it by 2 and square it. Step 4 is to add the 16 to both sides. Step 5 is to change the perfect square trinomial to the answer. Step 6 is to subtract the 9 so we can make equal to 0. And step 7 is to simply change the 0 to a y. Okay, now I think we're going to see another example. Yeah, and it's using the same process but just a different format. So example 3 says, consider the equation x squared minus 15x equals negative 44. Part A wants us to use the completing the square process to write this equation into this form. Okay, so we want to make sure we pay attention to that. So again, I'm going to go ahead and write my equation here. Now this is already half done for us. They already moved the 44 to the left side, to the right side of the equation. So now what we need to do is simply take the negative 15, divide it by 2, and square it. Now I know this is a fraction, but nothing wrong with a fraction. We can do this, okay? So negative 15 divided by 2, that's going to give you 7.5. So what are we, no, that's not 7.5. Is it 7.5? Yes, 7.5. So we're simply just going to take the square root. So we're going to square it. 15 times 15, I think, is 225. And 2 times 2 is 4. We're going to use a fraction. Nothing wrong with that. The next step is to go ahead and add the 225 over 4 to both sides of the equation. So this is going to become x squared minus 15x plus 225 over 4 equals negative 44 plus 225 over 4. Okay, so as we clearly know, the left side here, this is a perfect square trinomial. Okay. So the answer to this is going to be x minus square root of that is 15 over 2 square equals. Now we have to simplify this part here. Put a 1. I am doing side work, so multiply by 4 here. And what is that? You probably get the answer faster than me because I can be bad when it comes to arithmetic work. So that gives me 176. This is negative 176 plus 225. Oops, 5. Oop. 225. This is over 4. This is over 4. So then what is negative 176 plus 225? So you're going to subtract, keep the sign of the largest number. So that gives me 49 over 4. I don't think 49 divided by 4, that gives you a decimal. So we're just going to leave it as 49 over 4. Okay, and that is what goes here. 49 over 4. So now part A wants us to put it into that format. So we can say, let's see, that, what do they want to know? D is negative 15 over 2. That's what D equals. And D and E, sorry, we're dealing with this side right here, is, what is it? E, yeah, E is 49 over 4. And those are my two answers for part A. So we're still using the same process. It's just asking for the answer in different form. It's still the same process. We're still using all the steps, but just asking for the answer in different forms. So that was part A. They just wanted us to rewrite it. Like, notice from after this step, like when it's in this format, after this step here, we're going to solve using the square root method. And that's what we're going to do in the next part. Now, part B says, now solve the equation. So what was the answer? Okay. So I have x minus 15 over 2 squared equals 49 over 2, right? No, 4. Yeah, 4. Well, let me go with that little line again. 4. Okay, so now in order to solve this, I'm going to use the square root method. So use the square root method. Okay. So I'm going to square both sides. So this leaves me with x minus 15 over 2 equals plus or minus square root of 49 is 7, square root of 4 is 2. So the next step is to add 15 over 2 to both sides. Okay, cancels. I'm going to rewrite it here. X equals 15 over 2 plus or minus 7 over 2. So then I have the two answers. 15 over 2 plus 7 over 2. And x equals 15 over 2 minus 7 over 2. So we have two fractions with the same denominator. So 15 plus 7, what is that, 22? Hopefully, right? And over 2. And then 22 over 2 is 11. That sounds like a good number. And then 15 minus 7, isn't that 9? I think that's 9. Right, let's see. 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Oh, that's 8. Yeah, that's 8. I can't count or subtract. But this is why I have you to correct me in the comment section. 4. 8 divided by 2 is 4, right? So make sure you double check my arithmetic. The idea is you get the basic concept of how to solve it. And if I made a small arithmetic mistake, you always tell me in the comment section. Okay, so part A wanted us to rewrite this quadratic equation into this format, one of the two. And we use the completing the square method to do that. Part B wanted us to solve, and we use the square root method to solve that part. And we got the two values of x right here. Okay, do we have another example? We do have another example. And this just requires a little bit more more solving. So we want to find all the real solutions of this equation. Again, we want to start by isolating the variable. In this case, the variable is b. This is b. This is the variable. Oh, b. Okay, so I'm going to start by adding the 20 to both sides. Okay, so that's what, 500? Okay, I can add that. Okay, then I'm going to divide by 4. Whoop, cancels. So I am left with b minus a squared. What is that? 125? It has to be 125. I cannot be this bad when it comes to basic things. 125. Okay. So here, we're just going to solve using the square root method. Square root method. Okay. Which means I'm going to square root both sides. So I have b minus a equals plus or minus square root of 125. 125 is not a perfect square, but we can simplify it into 5 times square root of 25. So that leaves me with b minus a equals plus or minus 5 square root of 5. Now I'm going to add the a to both sides. B equals a plus or minus 5 square root of 5. Okay. Let's see if they do want us to write this answer in a specific way. So let me go ahead and bring that to here. I have b equals a plus 5 square root of 5. This is the answer that I get. So now they want me to write my answer in this form. When I type in my answer, this is the form that they want. So what would you say a is? And then b is 5. And then, oh, this is supposed to be c. Yeah, sorry for that part. And then c is 5. Again. So that's how I get my answer, right? That's the same answer. Yep, this is what I moved to that side. This right here. It's just rewriting it. And again, I cannot add a plus 5 because they're not like terms. Things to keep in mind. Okay. No, we don't have more examples for that. So in this lesson, we use the completing the square method and the square root method too. We did that too. We use that as well. It's completing the square is the first part of solving, and then you use let's say completing the square is rewriting the equation. Yeah, let's write that down. Completing the square is rewriting it. The square. You are rewriting it. Okay? And then you use the square root method to solve it. So those are the two things we use to solve. Okay? In order to actually solve the equation. Completing the square and the square root method. Okay? And we did that in this lesson. Okay?